Hello, dear listeners. Every family is a little universe with its own set of rules. Today, we are going to peek into one such universe and see exactly what is happening inside. Keisha always knew the end of their marriage would be just like this: public, humiliating, and theatrical. That was Derek's way. He didn't know how to do anything quietly. Even his betrayal had to be a production worthy of a Broadway premiere, complete with crystal backdrops, white tablecloths, the spotlight of restaurant chandeliers, and an audience at the neighboring tables who were pretending not to look, but were catching every word like hungry seagulls catching crumbs over the water. The wheels of her wheelchair glided silently across the marble floor of the restaurant. Keisha thought about how strange memory was. It doesn't hold on to what is important. It holds on to what hurts. She knew she would always remember the smell of this floor, a mix of expensive wax and someone's heavy perfume, just like she remembered the smell of the hospital corridor that night. The night she woke up after the accident and realized her legs wouldn't listen to her anymore. Just like she remembered the look on Derek's face when the doctor said recovery was unlikely. For a split second, something flashed in his eyes that looked like the disappointment of a customer discovering a scratch on a brand new luxury purchase. A year had passed since that night, a whole year that taught Keisha to distinguish the shades of pity in people's voices, from the sincere, cutting kind to the formal, ritualistic kind, like a mandatory "bless you" after a stranger sneezes. A year that showed her her husband's true face, stripped of the varnish of love and habit. A year that turned her from a wife into a burden, from a woman into a problem that needed solving. The waiter, with a face trained in polite indifference, moved a chair, making space for her wheelchair at a table near the panoramic window. Derek had chosen this spot on purpose. Everyone had to see. He always loved an audience, even when he was staging a tragedy. Keisha looked around slowly. The restaurant was exactly as she remembered it from their past life, the one before the accident, when they came here to celebrate deals, anniversaries, and victories. High ceilings with crown molding, heavy burgundy drapes, the dim light of crystal chandeliers, soft jazz flowing from invisible speakers. At the nearby tables sat people from their circle, successful, groomed, prosperous. The kind of people who never have to think about what it's like to navigate a ramp before entering a building, or what it's like to see the world from the height of a wheelchair, where everyone towers over you like adults over a child. She had chosen a severe black dress for the evening. Simple, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun. Her makeup was flawless. A year in a wheelchair hadn't taken away her ability to carry herself with elegance. On the contrary, she had learned a special art, the art of dignity that doesn't depend on the ability to walk. On her lap lay her purse, and inside it was a folder of documents, thin, plain, but heavy as a bazooka. Derek was nervously fidgeting with his wine glass, not looking at her. He had aged in this last year, or maybe she just hadn't noticed before. The wrinkles around his eyes had deepened. Gray was coming through at his temples, which he carefully masked with expensive dye. His suit was tailored, his watch cost as much as a new car, and his cologne was too sharp, too persistent. He looked like a man trying to convince himself that everything was under control, while knowing deep down it wasn't. "I'm glad you came," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly, like a string about to snap. "We need to talk." Keisha nodded silently. She knew why he had invited her. She had known everything for the last 2 months, ever since she hired a private investigator, got access to his bank accounts, and recovered his email passwords thanks to a programmer friend. She knew about Brianna. She knew about the pregnancy. She knew about the shell companies and the money laundering. She knew it all and had stayed silent, like a predator lying in wait, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "I'm listening," she replied calmly, surprising even herself with a composure forged through months of pain, humiliation, and sleepless nights lying in an empty bedroom, listening to him come home at dawn, smelling of another woman. He downed half his glass in one gulp. The red wine left a dark stain on his lips, looking like dried blood. Keisha, I can't live like this anymore, he began, his words rehearsed like a speech before a board of directors. It's unbearable. You're sick. You need care, and I can't do it. I wasn't built for the role of a nurse. I tried. I swear I tried, but... She listened and thought about how he was lying. Even now, in this moment, he was lying to himself, to her, to the waiter refilling his glass, and to the audience at the next tables. He hadn't tried once. He had turned away from her the very first day after the hospital, when he saw she couldn't get out of bed on her own, that she needed help with even the simplest things. The disgust in his eyes back then had been so open, so naked, that Keisha realized she had stopped being his wife the second she stopped being healthy. I want a divorce, he finally blurted out, and the relief on his face was obvious. It was as if he had dropped a ton of bricks. I see, Keisha said. Is that all? Is that the only thing you wanted to tell me? He blinked, confused by her calmness. He had expected tears, hysterics, begging. Instead, he got cold acceptance. Well, yes, no. I want everything to be civilized. I'll provide for you. I'll leave you the apartment, of course, alimony, maintenance. How generous, she said. Her voice was like a razor blade wrapped in velvet. He didn't catch the sarcasm, or maybe he didn't want to. He took another sip of wine, and she saw his hands shaking harder. He was nervous, waiting for something or someone. And then Keisha saw her. Brianna appeared in the doorway of the restaurant, like an actress walking onto the stage at the climax of a play. She was young, 26, no older. Blonde waves cascading to her shoulders, a tight dress emphasizing her rounded belly, high heels on which she walked swaying her hips like a runway model. Her face was pretty but empty, like a blank sheet of paper. No depth, no thoughts, none of that inner light that makes a woman truly beautiful. She headed straight for their table, and Keisha realized this was planned. This entire spectacle was a setup. Derek hadn't invited her for a conversation. He had staged a performance, a public humiliation, the triumph of the winner over the defeated. He always did love a dramatic finale. Brianna stopped at the table and placed her hand on the back of Derek's chair. The gesture was so possessive, so demonstrative, that several people at nearby tables stopped pretending they weren't listening. "Hello, Keisha," she said, and her voice carried a poorly concealed mockery. "Sorry to interrupt, but Derek and I decided that honesty is better than lies." "Honesty?" Keisha repeated, and the words seemed incredibly funny coming from the mouth of this girl who was sleeping with another woman's husband and now parading in front of his wife, sticking out her pregnant belly like a hunting trophy. Derek stood up, his face flushed with wine, anxiety, and that self-righteous anger that people who justify their own sins love so much. He put a hand on Brianna's shoulder, and Keisha saw a gold bracelet glint on her wrist. The very same one Keisha had picked out for herself for their anniversary, but never got to buy because of the accident. "Keisha," Derek's voice grew stronger, filled with the confidence that comes from having an ally. "I wanted to tell you man to man, privately, but you don't seem to take hints. So listen to me straight. You aren't a wife anymore. You're a burden, written off as damaged goods." The silence that followed those words was so thick you could touch it. Waiters froze with trays in their hands. People at neighboring tables stared openly. Somewhere in the kitchen, a spoon dropped, and the sound rang out like a church bell. Keisha sat motionless. She didn't lower her eyes, didn't look away, didn't cry. Inside her, something cold and sharp, like a shard of ice, slid along her ribs, but her face remained as calm as the surface of water before a storm. "Written off as damaged goods," she repeated thoughtfully, as if tasting the words. "Interesting phrasing. Maybe for furniture, or a broken tool." Brianna giggled. The sound was thin, squeaky, irritating like a mosquito buzzing. She hugged Derek around the waist, pressing against him, her belly rounding between them as a silent rebuke, proof that she was a real woman, capable of giving a man what a sick wife couldn't. "Derek is right. Brianna said, her voice sweet, like honey laced with poison. A real woman should be a woman. She should know how to be beautiful, desirable. She should give a man joy, not turn his life into an obligation. You understand yourself what kind of wife you are now. Keisha slowly shifted her gaze to her. She looked for a long time, studying her, and Brianna squirmed slightly under that gaze, though she tried to look confident. "What kind of wife am I?" Keisha repeated quietly. "You know, that's a good question. I was a wife for 12 years. For 12 years, I built a business alongside this man. I was the CFO of his company when he was just starting out. It was my money, my daddy's insurance settlement, that laid the foundation for what you now call his success. But apparently, none of that counts because I can't walk now." She leaned forward and opened her purse on her lap. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like a poker player who knows she's holding a royal flush. "Derek, did you really think I spent a year sitting at home staring at the ceiling?" she asked, pulling the thin folder of documents from her bag. The first shadow of doubt flickered across his face. He stepped closer to the table, looking at the folder like a trapped animal looks at a snare. "What is this?" he asked, his voice no longer so confident. Keisha placed the folder on the table and opened the stapled sheets. Bank statements, printed emails, photos, contracts. A whole year of work. Months of gathering information, evidence, leads. "This has been your life for the last 3 years," she said calmly. "Your kickbacks on city contracts. See these numbers? That's the money you laundered through shell companies. And this," she turned a page. "This is especially interesting. 3 companies registered to Brianna. Guess how much money went through them in the last 6 months?" Derek turned pale. Brianna stopped smiling. Keisha could see the adrenaline pulsing in her temples, her pupils dilating, her hands involuntarily clenching into fists. You were watching me?" Derek exhaled. "I was protecting my interests," Keisha corrected him. "You see, when your husband starts coming home at dawn smelling of someone else's perfume, when he stops touching you, when disgust replaces love in his eyes, a woman finds herself with time. Lots of time. And I spent it wisely. I hired a PI. I recovered your email passwords. Thank goodness for my programmer friend. He was very helpful. I got access to banking operations. You didn't forget I used to be the CFO, did you? I still have contacts at the bank." She turned another page, pulled out several photos, and fanned them out on the table like playing cards. The photos showed Derek and Brianna at the entrance of her apartment building, in restaurants, in his car. In one photo, they were kissing. "A year, Derek. For a whole year I collected this. Every statement, every document, every proof of your dishonesty. And you know what's funniest? You thought I was helpless. You thought I was broken. You thought I would just accept your decision and crawl away, grateful for whatever scraps you threw me, but you forgot one small detail." She leaned forward, her voice becoming harder, colder like steel. "You opened that company with my money, with my inheritance. I'm not just your wife. I'm a co-owner. 50% of the firm is mine on paper. You thought I didn't know. You thought I forgot how we filed those first papers. My lawyer has all the documents confirming this. And tomorrow?" She looked at her watch. "No, actually tonight, because it's already late. These documents about your fraud will land on the district attorney's desk." The silence in the restaurant became absolute. Even the music seemed to die down. The people at the neighboring tables didn't hide their interest anymore. They watched openly, like an audience at the theater during the climax of a drama. You wouldn't dare," Derek croaked, but his words sounded unconvincing, like a plea. "I already dared," Keisha replied. "The statement is written. The evidence is ready. My lawyer is waiting for my call. One word, and everything you take such pride in collapses. The business, your reputation, your freedom. Do you know how much time they give for this kind of fraud? For kickbacks on government contracts? For money laundering? I looked it up. Interesting numbers. Brianna backed away, letting go of Derek's hand. Her face went from rosy to gray. She looked at Keisha like a mouse looks at a snake, and naked fear splashed in her eyes. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I didn't know about the fraud. Derek said it was a legal business. I just signed the papers he gave me." "Of course you didn't know," Keisha chuckled. "An innocent lamb. 3 companies in your name, bank accounts, real estate bought with that money, and you knew nothing. The investigators will appreciate your naivety, especially when they see how much money flowed through your accounts. Accomplice, Brianna. It's called being an accomplice, and you'll have to answer for it too." The girl sobbed. Her hand darted to her stomach in an instinctive protective gesture. "Oh yes." Keisha pulled one more document from the folder. "I almost forgot. The touching ultrasound. Congratulations, it's a girl. Beautiful picture, right? Look, there's a date on it. And the term of pregnancy, 22 weeks. She raised her eyes to Brianna, her gaze sharp as a scalpel. "Funny math we have here. 22 weeks ago, counting back from the ultrasound date, was your company holiday party. Remember that party, Brianna? When you got drunk and spent the night not with Derek but with Jamal from sales. My detective did a very thorough job. He even has a statement from the hotel maid who saw you two leaving the room in the morning, and security camera footage." Brianna swayed, her face contorted as if she had been slapped. Derek turned to her, disbelief splashing in his eyes, mixed with rising anger. "What?" he exhaled. "What is she talking about?" I didn't... It was one time," Brianna stammered. "I was drunk. I didn't remember. I thought..." "You thought he wouldn't find out?" Keisha finished for her. "Or did you think that if you got pregnant, you could pass the baby off as his?" The detective pulled the medical records. "Brianna, when you conceived, Derek wasn't even in the city. He was on that long business trip. You knew. You knew, and you kept quiet. Hoped it would slide." The room froze. The pause was like the intake of breath before a scream, the second of silence before an explosion. Derek looked at Brianna, and understanding slowly dawned on his face, the understanding that he had been deceived, used, and betrayed by the very person for whom he was betraying his wife. "You," he began, his voice breaking into a wheeze. "You..." Brianna backed away, stumbling over the leg of a stranger's chair. Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembled. "Derek, listen, I love you. It was an accident." "Get out!" he barked, his voice so loud that several women at nearby tables flinched. "Get out of my life now!" Brianna sobbed, turned around, and practically ran toward the exit, stumbling awkwardly on her high heels, clutching her belly. The door slammed behind her, and silence returned to the hall. Keisha put the documents back into the folder and zipped up her purse. Her movements were calm and measured, like a person who has finished an important job and is satisfied with the result. "See you in court, Derek," she said quietly, turning her wheelchair toward the exit. "And think carefully about how much your freedom is worth, because I'm ready to bargain, but the price will be high, very high." She rolled toward the exit, and the room followed her with gazes that were no longer pitying or disgusted, but full of respect and fear for the woman who had managed to turn her own humiliation into a weapon. Behind her, Derek collapsed onto a chair, his face chalk white, his hands shaking. Behind her lay his lies, his betrayal, his arrogance. Ahead, beyond the restaurant doors, in the darkness of the evening, a car with a driver waited for her. He helped her into the back seat and folded the wheelchair into the trunk. Keisha leaned back against the soft leather seat and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding as if it wanted to jump out of her chest. Her hands trembled slightly. Adrenaline surged in her blood. But a barely noticeable smile played on her lips, the smile of a hunter who had tracked prey for a long time and finally driven it into a trap. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A message from her lawyer. "Ready to act on your signal." Keisha typed a reply. "Waiting for his call. I think he'll call tomorrow morning. Be ready to negotiate." The car pulled away and the lights of the restaurant were left behind, dissolving into the city night. Ahead was a war, a real brutal war with no rules. But Keisha was ready. A year in a wheelchair had taught her the most important thing: falling does not mean defeat. Sometimes you have to fall to realize how high you can rise. Monday morning greeted Derek with the sounds of a scandal that tore through his apartment like a wildfire in a dry forest, devouring the remnants of the illusion of prosperity he had so carefully built over the last few months. Brianna was pacing the living room, mascara smearing down her cheeks, her voice, usually so sweet and insinuating, turning into a screech that made him want to cover his ears. "Derek, just listen to me," she screamed, grabbing the sleeve of his shirt. "It was one miserable time when I was drunk and wasn't thinking. I love you, only you." Derek shook off her hand like it was something filthy, rage blazing in his eyes. The rage of a man who suddenly realized he had become the victim of the same betrayal he had inflicted on another. "Love?" he barked, his voice sounding like the bark of a cornered dog. "Do you even know the meaning of that word? You slept with Jamal, that loser from sales, and you're carrying his child while lying to me that it was mine." She fell onto the sofa, hunched over, wrapping her arms around her belly. Her sobs were so hysterical that the neighbors surely heard every gasp through the thin walls of the apartment complex. "I didn't know," she wailed. "I didn't know whose baby it was. I hoped it was yours. I swear, I wanted it to be yours. I wanted to—" Derek grabbed an ashtray from the table and threw it against the wall with all his might. The glass shattered with a loud ring, shards fanning out across the hardwood floor. "Stop playing the victim! Making big eyes, talking about our future family!" Brianna sobbed convulsively, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. She looked pathetic, like a guilty child caught stealing from a parent's wallet. "I was afraid of losing you," she whispered through tears. "You said yourself you wanted a child, that your wife could never give you one. I thought if I had your baby, you'd stay with me forever." Derek looked at her with the kind of disgust usually reserved for squashed insects leaving dirty spots on a clean floor. "Pack your things," he said coldly, enunciating every word. "And get out. Go to your mama's, to your girlfriend's, to hell. I don't care, but be gone in an hour and carry that baby wherever you want, just not in front of my eyes." "Derek!" She jumped up from the sofa, rushing to him, trying to hug him, but he pushed her away so sharply she almost fell. "Where will I go? I have no money, no place to live. I'm pregnant." "Go to Jamal," he threw over his shoulder, heading for the door. "Let the daddy take care of you. I'm done. I've wasted my whole life on you women. First Keisha with her disability, now you with your bastard." He slammed the door so hard the glass in the frames rattled. In the ensuing silence, Brianna slowly slid to the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and buried her face in her palms, sobbing like an abandoned animal. Derek walked out onto the street, greedily inhaling the cold autumn air that smelled of decaying leaves and exhaust fumes, and pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. His lawyer answered after the third ring. "Mr. Henderson, I need a consultation urgently," Derek blurted out, walking down the sidewalk without seeing where he was going. "Right now. It's a catastrophe." The lawyer's voice was calm, professionally emotionless, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Mr. Langston, I'm already aware of the situation. Your spouse, that is, Keisha, well, her attorney contacted me this morning. The documents she possesses are very serious. Kickbacks on government contracts, laundering through shell firms, tax evasion. If she hands this over to the district attorney, you are facing federal prison time, 5 to 8 years. Derek stopped in the middle of the street, leaning against a building wall. His legs suddenly felt like cotton, as if after a long run. "But she's my wife," he wheezed. "She can't turn me in. There are laws." "Ex-wife," the lawyer corrected. "You publicly announced the divorce yesterday, and spousal privilege, the right to refuse to testify against a spouse, does not apply to documentary evidence, especially when she is the victim and a co-owner of the business. She has an ironclad right to protect her interests. What do I do? Derek wiped a hand across his face. His palm was wet with cold sweat. Negotiate, the lawyer replied simply. She wants a fair division of assets. Give her what she demands, and perhaps she won't hand over the incriminating material. I've already spoken to her representatives. They are ready to talk. Derek hung up, shoved the phone into his pocket, and slowly walked back toward the building. But he didn't want to go up to the apartment. Brianna was still there with her tears and hysterics. The air up there hung heavy with lies, betrayal, and the collapse of all his plans. He sat on a cold bench in the courtyard, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in years, felt truly helpless. At the same time, on the other side of Atlanta, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment Keisha had been renting for the last 6 months after Derek effectively pushed her out of their family home, the air smelled of freshly brewed tea and peach cobbler that Mama Louise had baked early that morning. Keisha sat by the window in her chair, watching the courtyard where children played, thinking about how strangely life worked. Yesterday, she was a broken woman whose husband publicly humiliated her in a restaurant. Today, she felt like a general who had won the first battle in a long war. Baby girl, Mama Louise placed a cup of steaming tea on the table and sat opposite her. Her wrinkled hands rested over her daughter's. I am so proud of you. You were magnificent yesterday. Keisha chuckled, taking a sip of the tea, hot and strong, just the way she always liked it. Mama, I was just protecting what belongs to me by right, she said calmly. Derek thought I broke after the accident, that I became helpless. But you know what's funny? It was the wheelchair that gave me the advantage. Mama Louise raised an eyebrow questioningly, and Keisha continued, looking out the window where the wind was tearing the last yellow leaves from the trees. When you're healthy, you have work, meetings, hustle, endless running around. No time to think. But when you're confined to a chair, time is all you have. I could sit at the computer for hours, recovering passwords, studying bank statements, reading his correspondence. I became invisible to him. He stopped noticing me, stopped fearing me, and that was his mistake. But how did you organize all this? Mama Louise asked, pouring herself some tea. The PI, access to accounts, documents. Keisha smiled, and the smile was sad, like a memory of a past that could not be returned. Remember Sasha, the programmer from my old team, the one Derek fired 2 years ago without severance? He was happy to help me crack Derek's email, said it was his personal revenge, and the detective, Lydia recommended him. Remember my sorority sister? Her husband used to be a cop. He retired and opened a private agency. He turned out to be very professional and access to the bank accounts. I got that legally. I'm a co-owner, Mama. I retained all rights. Derek just forgot about it, or hoped I had forgotten. Mama Louise shook her head, tears of pride glistening in her eyes, mixed with pain for her daughter, who had to go through such humiliation. And now what, baby? She asked quietly. Do you really want to put him in jail? Keisha thought for a moment, turning the cup in her hands. Steam from the tea enveloped her face in a soft haze. No, Mama, she said finally. Prison is too easy for him. There he'll become a victim, feel sorry for himself, blame me. No, I want him to pay in cash, to give me what is rightfully mine, the company, the house, compensation. Let him feel what it's like to lose everything he thought was his. Let him start from zero, just like I started after the accident. The phone on the table buzzed. Unknown number. Keisha picked up cautiously. Keisha Vaughn. The voice was male, low, slightly raspy. Keisha, it's Marcus. Marcus Chestnut, Derek's business partner. I apologize for bothering you, but I really need to speak with you. Can we meet? Keisha frowned, remembering Marcus, a tall, always serious man in his 40s who kept to himself at company parties, didn't drink too much, was always polite but distant. About what exactly? She asked warily. About the situation with Derek, Marcus replied, fatigue audible in his voice. I know what happened yesterday at the restaurant. Derek called me this morning in hysterics. Keisha, I want to help you. I have information that might be useful, and I need to explain something. Can I come to see you this evening? Keisha hesitated. Marcus was Derek's partner. He could be his ally. But something in this man's voice sounded sincere. All right, she said. 6 o'clock at my place. She dictated the address, hung up, and looked at her mother. That's Derek's partner, Keisha said thoughtfully. He wants to meet, says he can help. Mama Louise frowned, alarm flickering in her eyes. Be careful, baby. Could it be a trap? Maybe Derek sent him to find out what you're planning. Maybe, Keisha agreed, but I'm ready for any scenario. Let him come. Let's see what he wants. Evening arrived quickly, as if time decided to speed up its run. At 5:30, the doorbell rang, and Mama Louise went to open it, throwing a warning glance at her daughter. Marcus stood on the threshold with a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in his hands and the embarrassed look of a man unsure if he is doing the right thing. Hello, he said, extending the flowers to Mama Louise. Forgive the intrusion. I'm Marcus. Mama Louise took the bouquet silently, nodded, and let him in. Marcus walked into the room where Keisha was sitting and froze for a second looking at her. Something akin to pain flashed in his eyes. Keisha, he said quietly, thank you for agreeing to see me. He sat in the armchair opposite her, and Keisha studied his face carefully, tired with deep wrinkles around the eyes, gray at the temples, but honest, open. I'm listening, Marcus, she said, folding her hands on her lap. He sighed heavily, rubbed the bridge of his nose with his fingers, gathering his thoughts. I want to say that I was always against what Derek was doing, he began slowly. The kickbacks, the laundering, the shell companies. I warned him 3 years ago when he started these schemes, told him it would lead to ruin, but he wouldn't listen. He was obsessed with money, success, status. I kept my side of the business clean, separate accounting, and I have documents proving it. Keisha nodded, listening intently. Why are you telling me this? She asked directly. Because I don't want to drown with him, he answered just as directly. And because I want to help you. You are right in what you're doing. Derek deserves to pay, but I want you to know not everyone in our company is dishonest, and I am ready to be a witness if necessary. Ready to show my documents, prove that my part of the business is clean. He paused, then added quietly. And one more thing. I always respected you, Keisha. When you worked as CFO, I admired your mind, your principles. You were the best specialist I ever met. And when the accident happened, and then I saw Derek turn away from you, I was ashamed. Ashamed for him, ashamed for myself because I stayed silent, didn't interfere. Keisha looked at him for a long time, and something in her chest trembled, softened. She was so used to coldness and betrayal that Marcus's sincerity seemed unreal, too good to be true. Marcus, she said cautiously, I appreciate your honesty, but you understand I can't just believe you. I already made the mistake of trusting a man who swore he loved me once. He nodded, his smile sad. I understand, he said, and I'm not asking for trust. I'm asking for a chance to prove I'm telling the truth. Take my documents, check them, talk to my accountant. I'm open to any audit. And if you need my help in court, in negotiations, I'll be there. He stood up, pulled a flash drive from his inner jacket pocket, and placed it on the table in front of Keisha. Here is all the documentation for my part of the business for the last 5 years, he said. Look, analyze. If you decide I can be useful, call. You have my number. He headed for the door, but Keisha stopped him. Marcus, wait. Why are you doing this, really? He turned around. In his eyes flashed something deep, hidden, like a secret kept too long. Because sometimes silence is also betrayal, he said softly. And I want to fix my mistake. I was silent for 3 years. That's enough. He left, and Keisha remained sitting at the table, turning the flash drive in her hands, thinking about the strangeness of human nature, about how sometimes help comes from where you least expect it. Across town, in a small, dimly lit dive bar on the outskirts that smelled of tobacco smoke, spilled beer, and something else, heavy and dangerous. Derek sat at a corner table opposite a man with a flat face and cold eyes that held nothing human. This man, known simply as Darius the Hammer Stokes, had helped Derek with laundering for the past 2 years. He was the one people turned to when legal paths ended and the gray zone began, where rules were written by those with the most muscle. "So," Derek said, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and desperation. "I have a problem. My ex-wife gathered dirt on me, wants to put me away. I need this problem solved. You understand what I mean?" Darius silently took a sip from his mug, looking at Derek with a long gaze that sent a chill down his spine. "I understand," he said finally, his voice flat as asphalt. "But you understand this will cost you." Derek nodded, swallowed hard. His hands lying on the table were trembling. "Whatever it takes, I'll pay. Just make it so the documents disappear. So she keeps her mouth shut. I can't go to prison. I can't lose everything." Darius smirked, and the expression was so cold, Derek involuntarily shivered. "All right," Darius said. "I'll see what can be done. But keep in mind, if something goes sideways, you don't know me. Never saw me. Understand?" Darius nodded like an obedient puppet, and in that moment, he finally crossed the line beyond which there was no return. Wednesday began as usual. The gray sky outside promised rain. Wind chased last year's leaves across the asphalt, and the city lived its measured life, unaware that in one of the apartments of an old building, a small war was unfolding where the stakes were measured not in money, but in human fates. Keisha was reviewing the documents on the flash drive Marcus had left when the doorbell rang. Sharp, persistent, the way people ring when they are used to being let in immediately and without question. Mama Louise had just gone to the grocery store, and Keisha was alone, which seemed like a bad coincidence in that moment. She rolled to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw 2 men, both in dark jackets, both with faces that expressed nothing, as if their owners had long ago learned not to show emotion, because in their line of work, feelings only got in the way. Keisha slowly opened the door, leaving the chain on, and looked at them calmly, though her heart beat faster, like a bird sensing a predator. "Ms. Vaughn?" asked the older one. His voice was polite, almost courteous, but cold as ice on a winter river. "May we come in? We need to talk." "About business?" "What business?" she asked, not removing the chain. The second man, younger with a scar over his eyebrow, smirked. It was an unpleasant look, like the touch of a stranger's hand in the dark. "Business concerning your husband," he said. "Mr. Langston, we represent the interests of his business partners." "Open up. We're not going to stand in the hallway like Jehovah's Witnesses." Keisha hesitated for a second, then removed the chain and rolled back, letting them in. They entered, looked around, their gazes sliding over the room, assessing, memorizing, like thieves sizing up loot. "Sit down," Keisha said, pointing to the sofa. Her voice was steady, though inside everything was clenched into a tight knot. They sat without taking off their jackets. The older one pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and looked at Keisha questioningly. She shook her head and he put the pack back. "So look here, Ms. Vaughn," the older one began, his fingers, short and thick, tapping a measured rhythm on his knee. "We came at the request of a man to whom Derek owes a rather large sum, and this man is concerned about the situation that has developed. You see, if Derek ends up in places not so distant, shall we say, the debt will remain unpaid, and that is not good, very not good." Keisha listened intently, and with cold clarity, the picture of what was happening formed in her head. Derek sent people to intimidate her, force her to back down, withdraw the statement. "And what do you suggest?" she asked calmly, her hands resting motionless on the armrests of her wheelchair, though her palms were sweating with tension. The younger one leaned forward, and the smell of his cheap, sharp cologne hit her nose. "We suggest coming to an agreement," he said, his voice soft, enveloping, like a salesman convincing you to buy defective goods. You withdraw the statement from the district attorney, hide the documents about Derek's fraud far away, and in return, you get compensation. Decent compensation. The apartment, let's say, and a monthly allowance. Everyone stays happy. Derek continues working, pays off the debt. You get money. Everyone wins. Keisha looked at them for a long moment, thinking about how easily people decide others' fates, how simply they reduce everything to money, as if cash can buy dignity, respect, justice. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice becoming harder, sharper. The older one sighed, like a teacher forced to explain obvious things to a slow student. "Miss Vaughn, why do you need trouble?" he said, steel notes appearing in his voice. "You're a sick woman, alone, elderly mother. Why press a man who can cause problems? It's much easier to take the money and live in peace, right?" It was a hint, a poorly veiled threat wrapped in concern, like poison in a sweet coating. Keisha felt fear slowly rising from her stomach to her throat, but on the outside, she remained calm because a year in a wheelchair had taught her the main thing. Showing weakness means losing. "I understand," she said slowly, her fingers unnoticed slipping into the pocket of her robe where a voice recorder lay turned on, a habit she'd kept for the last few months, recording everything that might be useful. "So, you are suggesting I take money to forget that my husband robbed me, humiliated me, abandoned me?" "Not forget," the younger one corrected. "Forgive and receive compensation. It's reasonable you agree." Keisha nodded, and in that moment, something inside her clicked like a switch. Fear receded, giving way to cold fury. "You know what is reasonable?" she said, her voice becoming rigid as a whip crack. "Reasonable would be for you to leave right now and never come back, because this conversation is recorded on a voice recorder, because there is a surveillance camera in the hallway that my lawyer installed after the threats began, and because the recording of this visit is automatically uploaded to cloud storage, accessible by 3 people, including the investigator I am already working with." She pulled the recorder from her pocket and placed it on the table in front of them. The red light on it blinked like a warning signal. "So, if something happens to me or my mother," Keisha continued, enunciating every word clearly, "the recording of this conversation will be with the police within an hour, along with your faces from the surveillance camera, along with the name of your boss, whom I, by the way, have already identified through Derek's financial documents, Darius Stokes, correct? He helped my husband with the laundering and is now afraid the investigation will reach him too." The men's faces changed. The older one tensed up like a spring before a shot. The younger one paled, the scar over his eyebrow standing out brightly against his white skin. "You're bluffing," the older one said, but his voice wavered. "Check it," Keisha replied coldly. "Step out into the hall and look up. The camera is hanging by the elevator, small, black. See it? No? But it's there, and it already recorded you." She was bluffing. There was no camera in the hallway. But they didn't know that, and doubt had already taken root in their confidence like a worm in an apple. The older one stood up, nodded to the younger one, and he stood up as well. They headed for the door, their movements no longer so confident, shoulders slightly hunched. "Tell your boss," Keisha called after them, "if he tries to pressure me one more time, I will add his name to the list of defendants in the case. I have enough evidence of his participation in Derek's schemes." They left. The door closed, and Keisha remained alone in the silence of the apartment. The silence was deafening, like ringing in the ears after an explosion. Her hands shook. Her heart pounded as if it were about to burst out of her chest. She lowered her head to her chest, closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to calm down. She won this round. But at what cost? The bluff might not have worked. They could have checked, found out there was no camera, come back. And then, Keisha grabbed her phone with trembling fingers, found Marcus's number, and pressed call. He answered after the second ring. "Keisha?" His voice sounded concerned. "Did something happen?" "Marcus," she exhaled, her voice finally cracking, showing the tension of the last few minutes. "People sent by a criminal associate of Derek's came to see me, tried to pressure me, forced me to withdraw the statement." "What?" Marcus's voice became sharp, loud. "Are you okay? Did they threaten you? Where are you now?" "Home. I'm okay," Keisha said, her voice gradually steadying. "I scared them off. Told them the conversation was recorded, that there were cameras. They left. But Marcus, I'm scared. What if they come back?" "I'm coming over right now," he said decisively. 10 minutes. Do not open the door to anyone until I arrive." He arrived in 12 minutes, breathless, agitated. And with him was another man, a sturdy guy in his mid-30s, in a sports jacket with a sharp gaze. "This is Mike," Marcus introduced him. "My friend, ex-military, works in private security now. He'll stay close to you for a few days until the situation clears up." Keisha shook her head, the stubbornness that helped her survive this year manifesting again. "Marcus, no security," she said firmly. "I bluffed about the camera in the hall, but I really have the recording of the conversation. That's enough. They won't come back. Too risky for them." Marcus squatted down in front of her wheelchair, looked into her eyes, and his gaze was full of such sincere care that something in Keisha's chest squeezed painfully. "Keisha, please," he said quietly. "Let me help. I can't sit idly by knowing you are being threatened. Mike will just be nearby, shifting with a colleague, unobtrusively. You won't even notice." She looked at him for a long time. Memories of Derek, Brianna, the faces of those two men who just left floated in her mind. She realized that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "Fine," she said finally. "But only for a couple of days, until I know they really backed off." Marcus exhaled in relief, straightened up, and Mike nodded, settling into a chair by the window overlooking the entrance. At that same time, in the office Derek rented in the business center, his own drama was unfolding. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Creditors, banks, partners, everyone wanted one thing: money, which he no longer had. Bank accounts were frozen by request of the investigators. The loan he took for the development of a new project required repayment, but there was no money in the accounts or in his pockets because everything he had laundered over the last few years went to maintaining Brianna, gifts, this illusion of a beautiful life that burst like a soap bubble. His secretary, a young girl with painted lips and an indifferent look, placed another stack of documents on his desk. "Mr. Langston, Darius called you," she said monotonously. "Said the issue with your ex-wife wasn't resolved. Asked you to call back." Derek grabbed the phone, dialed the number, and when Darius answered, his voice was so angry, so cold, that Derek involuntarily flinched. "Your woman turned out not to be as simple as you said," Darius snapped. "She has recordings, cameras, everything locked down. She recorded my guys on a wire and threatened police, so the issue isn't resolved. And it won't be resolved. Deal with it yourself and pay back your debt in a week, otherwise the conversation will be with you, and you won't like it." He hung up. Derek remained sitting with the phone in his hand, staring out the window where the first drops of rain were slowly sliding down the glass. The world outside seemed so alien, so hostile, as if he had suddenly found himself in a strange city without money, documents, or hope. The next day, Thursday, Derek gathered his courage and called Keisha. His voice was pathetic, pleading, like the voice of a beggar asking for alms. "Keisha, please, meet with me," he begged. "I need to talk to you, just 15 minutes. I'm begging you." Keisha agreed. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts where there were no mutual acquaintances. The walls were shabby, the tables sticky, and the waitress looked at them with poorly concealed curiosity. Derek sat opposite her. In 2 days, he had aged several years. His face was gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. His hands shook when he lifted the coffee cup to his mouth. "Keisha," he began, his voice sounding like screeching rusty hinges. "Forgive me. Forgive me for everything. For the restaurant, for Brianna, for the words I said. I was wrong. I was not myself. But I love you. Always loved you. I just didn't cope well. Couldn't be there when you were hurting. I'm weak. I'm selfish. But let's try again. I'll come back. I'll take care of you, I swear." Keisha listened, and inside her there was no pity, No compassion, not even anger, only cold contempt for a man trying to return what he himself had destroyed. "Derek," she said calmly, her voice like a blade wrapped in silk. "You never loved me. You loved the idea of me, a beautiful, successful woman by your side, your trophy, your ornament. And when I stopped being a pretty picture, when I became a burden requiring care, you turned away. And not even immediately. Remember how in the first weeks after the accident, you came to the hospital and grimaced when the nurse explained how to help me? Remember how you looked away when I was in pain? Remember how you started staying late at work not to see me at home?" Derek lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. "I made a mistake," he wheezed. "But people make mistakes. Give me a chance to fix it." Keisha leaned forward, her gaze hard, merciless. "A chance? You want a chance? Fine. Give me what belongs to me by right. The company, the apartment, the money. Sign the asset division papers, and then I won't hand the evidence to the investigator. You stay free. That's your chance." He raised his head, looking at her with desperation in his eyes. "But that's all I have. If I give you the company, I have nothing left." "I had nothing left after your betrayal either," Keisha replied coldly, "except a wheelchair and humiliation in a restaurant. So we're even." She turned her wheelchair toward the exit, but Derek jumped up, grabbed her arm, panic splashing in his eyes like a trapped animal. "Fine," he shouted. "You win. Take it all. But know this, you aren't the only smart one. Marcus is in on it too. He knew about the fraud, participated. His hands are dirty too, and if I go down, he goes down with me." Keisha froze. Her heart skipped a beat. Marcus? Could he really? Did she make a mistake again, trusting the wrong person? "What did you say?" she asked quietly, her voice sounding alien, distant. Derek smirked, and the smirk was triumphant, malicious. "Marcus Chestnut, my partner, your new defender. He is aware of all the schemes, signed documents, received his share. So if you dig, you'll find dirt on him too. He just turned out to be smarter than me, hid the documents, covered his tracks, but he is just like me, just like me." He let go of her hand, collapsed back onto the chair, and Keisha silently rolled out of the cafe. In her head, a single thought beat rhythmically. Did Marcus lie? Was everything he said a lie? Saturday began with that feeling of anxiety that gives no rest when you wake up and realize the world you fell asleep in isn't the same one you woke up in. Keisha spent a sleepless night tossing in bed, replaying Derek's words in her head, trying to figure out what was truth and what was a lie. A desperate attempt of a drowning man to pull everyone down with him. Marcus is in on the fraud, participated, received his share. These words hit her temples like a hammer, preventing her from thinking about anything else. By morning, Keisha made a decision. She would go to Marcus and find out the truth, the whole truth, without omissions or pretty promises. Marcus's office was located in the same business center as Derek's, but on a different floor. When the elevator opened, Keisha saw glass doors with the company logo, a stern receptionist behind the desk, and it all looked solid, respectable, as if no filth was possible behind these walls. "I need Marcus Chestnut," Keisha said, rolling up to the desk. "Urgently." The receptionist looked at her with professional politeness that barely hid curiosity. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he will see me." "Tell him it's Keisha." A minute later, Marcus walked out of his office. His face was worried when he saw her expression, cold and hard as stone. "Keisha, what happened?" he asked, coming closer. "I need to talk to you." "In private," she added, her voice allowing no objections. They went into his office, spacious, bright, with a large window overlooking rooftops and a gray sky promising rain. Marcus closed the door, turned to her, genuine concern on his face. "What happened?" he asked again. Keisha turned her chair to look him straight in the eyes. In that gaze, there was no warmth, only a cold demand for truth. Derek told me yesterday that you knew about the fraud, that you participated in the schemes, that you received your share. Is that true? Marcus froze. A shadow passed over his face. Not fear, not guilt, but rather the fatigue of a man tired of lies, omissions, the need to explain what should have been understood without words. Yes, he said simply, and the word fell between them like a stone into water, shattering the last remnants of trust. I knew. Keisha was silent, and the silence was so heavy the air in the office seemed to thicken, pressing down. But, Marcus continued, walking to a safe in the corner of the office, I didn't participate. I knew, I warned him, I tried to stop him, but I didn't participate. He opened the safe, pulled out a thick binder, and placed it on the table in front of Keisha. 2 years ago, when Derek started these schemes, I wrote a letter to the company board, he said, flipping through documents. Here is the copy. I officially stated I did not agree with the business methods my partner was using. I asked to separate the accounting, introduce separate bookkeeping for my part of the projects. He showed her the document, official letterhead, stamps, signatures, date from 2 years ago. I'm a coward, Keisha, he said quietly, his voice full of bitterness. I knew Derek was breaking the law, but I was afraid of conflict, afraid to destroy the partnership, lose the business, end up on the street. I thought if I just walled myself off, kept my side clean, that would be enough. I was wrong. Silence is also complicity, moral, if not legal. Keisha slowly looked through the documents, accounting reports, contracts, letters. Everything was clean, neat, no traces of shell companies, kickbacks, laundering. Marcus truly kept separate records, and his part of the business was impeccable. Why didn't you show me this right away? She asked, her voice softening because the documents didn't lie, and Derek's lie was obviously a final attempt to drag at least someone down with him. Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, Marcus replied, sitting on the edge of the desk. Afraid you'd say, they're all the same, they all lie, all betray. And I didn't want to pressure you. I didn't want you to think I was using the situation to get close to you. I just wanted to help. No conditions, no demands in return. Keisha closed the binder, rested her hands on it, and something in her chest thawed, softened like ice under the spring sun. Marcus, she said gently, forgive me for not trusting you. Just, after everything that happened, it's hard to believe anyone. He nodded, his smile sad and understanding. I know, and I'm not offended. You have the right not to trust, but know this, if you need my help, I will be there. As a friend? He pronounced the last word with caution, fearing it would sound inappropriate, but Keisha didn't look away, and something resembling gratitude appeared in her eyes. The following week flew by in a series of meetings with lawyers, document preparations, and negotiations that went slowly, painfully, like surgery without anesthesia. Derek resisted, tried to bargain, threatened, begged, but Keisha was unyielding as a cliff under crashing waves. And with each day, his position became weaker because the alternative to negotiation was prison. On Monday, a week after the conversation with Marcus, the preliminary hearings took place. The courthouse was old, with peeling paint on the walls, smelling of bureaucracy and human fates decided here daily. Derek came with a lawyer, expensive, experienced, in a suit that cost as much as a used car. But even this lawyer couldn't change the facts when they were documented, notarized, undeniable. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a tired face and a piercing gaze, reviewed the documents, listened to both sides, and suggested the parties settle peacefully without bringing the matter to a full trial. Gentlemen, she said, taking off her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose, you have an opportunity to resolve everything in a civilized manner. Otherwise, this case will drag on for months, cost you both a round sum, and in the end, the court's decision might satisfy no one. Think about negotiations. Derek's lawyer leaned over to him, whispered something, and Derek's face turned gray, gaunt, like a man who realized he lost the war and now only needs to sign the surrender. 5 days later, on Saturday, they met again, but not in court, at a notary's office that smelled of old paper and where the silence was so thick you could hear the pens scratching on documents. Keisha sat at the table, next to her lawyer, a woman with a sharp mind and a steady hand. Opposite sat Derek and his lawyer. Between them lay the documents that changed everything. According to the terms of the agreement, the notary read in a monotone voice, the company transfers in equal shares to Ms. Vaughn and Mr. Chestnut. Mr. Langston signs over the apartment at the address in favor of Ms. Vaughn, pays compensation in the amount of within 6 months. In exchange, Ms. Vaughn agrees not to transfer incriminating materials to investigative authorities. Derek signed the documents with a shaking hand. Each signature was like a blow to his own ambition, his own pride. When the last document was signed, he raised his eyes to Keisha. His gaze was full of hatred mixed with despair. "Are you happy?" he asked hoarsely. "You took everything? Everything I worked for 20 years?" Keisha looked at him calmly. There was no triumph in her eyes, only cold justice. "You took my health, my dignity, my faith in people," she said quietly. "We're even." They left the notary's office in different directions, Derek with his lawyer one way, Keisha with her representative the other. Their paths crossed no more, like parallel lines destined never to meet. But when Keisha rolled out onto the street into the building's lobby, she saw her. Brianna. The girl stood by the window, holding an infant wrapped in a pink blanket. Her face was swollen from tears, her hair disheveled, clothes crumpled. "Keisha!" she shouted, rushing toward her. "Wait!" Keisha stopped. Something about the sight of this girl, once so self-assured and triumphant, now broken and pathetic, evoked not schadenfreude, but a strange mix of pity and indifference. "What do you need, Brianna?" she asked wearily. "I need help," Brianna sobbed, her voice sounding like the mewling of an abandoned kitten. "Derek kicked me out. I'm living with my parents in a one-bedroom apartment. I have no money, no job. The baby is sick. I need child support from Derek. He promised we would be a family." Keisha looked at her, and the scene in the restaurant floated in her memory. This same girl, pregnant, triumphant, whispering, "A real woman should be a woman." Karma is a strange thing. It returns to us what we give to the world, sometimes faster than we expect. "Brianna," Keisha said calmly, "the baby isn't Derek's. You know that yourself. Go to the real father, to Jamal. Let him pay child support." "But Derek said he loved me," Brianna wailed. "Said we would be together." "Derek said a lot of things," Keisha replied. Her voice held no anger, no pity, only fatigue. "He told me for 12 years that he loved me. Turned out he lied. You used him for money and status. He used you for youth and sex. You both got what you deserved. Now deal with it yourselves." She turned her wheelchair and rolled toward the exit, not looking back at the sobbing Brianna with the baby in her arms. In her soul there was neither victory nor joy, only emptiness after a long war when you realize that even a one battle leaves scars. At the exit of the building, Marcus was waiting for her. He stood by his car, and when he saw her, he smiled warmly, sincerely, without hidden motives. "Is it over?" he asked, helping her down the ramp. "It's all behind us," Keisha nodded, and for the first time in many months, she felt the tension release her shoulders, felt her breathing become easier. Marcus helped her into the car, put the wheelchair in the trunk, and when he sat behind the wheel, he turned to her, taking her hand in his. The touch was so gentle, so careful, as if he was afraid to break something fragile. "Keisha," he said quietly, nervousness audible in his voice. "I wanted to say, these weeks we worked together, talked. I realized—" Keisha's phone buzzed in her purse, interrupting him. She freed her hand with an apologetic gesture and picked up. Unknown number. "Ms. Vaughn?" A female voice, professional, crisp. This is the rehabilitation clinic. Dr. Robinson, I have news for you regarding the results of your recent exams. Can we meet tomorrow? It's important." Keisha felt her heart skip a beat. "Did something happen?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Not over the phone," the doctor replied. "Come in tomorrow at 10 a.m. Believe me, it's worth it." The line went dead. Keisha slowly lowered the phone to her lap. Marcus looked at her with concern. "Is something wrong?" "I don't know," she whispered. "The doctor wants to meet. Says she has news. Important news." Marcus started the car, and they drove through the evening city where streetlights were lighting up. Ahead, around the turn, something new awaited them. Unknown, frightening, and simultaneously exciting, like the next page of a book you are scared yet eager to turn. The clinic greeted them with the smell of antiseptic and hope. Dr. Robinson, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes, laid out scans in front of Keisha. "There is a chance for partial recovery," she said. "A new experimental therapy. Not a guarantee, but a possibility to walk with support. It will require months of work and money." Keisha nodded, and warmth spread in her chest, like dawn after a long night. "I agree." Marcus, learning of the decision, insisted on paying for part of the treatment. Keisha refused, but he was stubborn. "Not as a partner," he said quietly, "as a person who wants to help." Months of rehab merged into a series of pain, sweat, and small victories. Marcus visited regularly, brought books, talked about company affairs, or simply sat nearby when words weren't needed. They grew closer, and Keisha realized this wasn't pity, not duty, but something real growing out of respect and understanding. Mama Louise watched her daughter and once said, "You know, maybe Derek gave you a gift with his betrayal, freed you from a dead relationship." 6 months later, Keisha took her first steps with a walker. Marcus held her hand, and the tears on his face were so sincere that Keisha's heart squeezed with tenderness. A month after that, she led a business meeting in the office, announcing a new company strategy: honest work, social projects. She sat in her chair, but she carried herself like a queen. In the evening, on the office terrace, Marcus spoke up. "Keisha, I want to say—" She stopped him. "Wait. I'm afraid to trust again. Afraid it's pity." "Pity?" Marcus shook his head. "I admire you. Your strength. I fell in love with you when you worked as CFO and tore apart our plans. Then I saw how you fought after the accident, and I fell in love even more." Keisha was silent for a long time, then said quietly, slowly, step by step, like in rehab. A year later, they were walking in the park, Keisha with a cane, Marcus beside her, holding her hand. They sat on a bench, and Keisha looked into the distance. "You know, sometimes I think, what if the accident never happened?" she said thoughtfully. "You would have lived in a beautiful lie," Marcus answered. "And I wouldn't have found out how strong I am, wouldn't have met you, not truly." They sat hugging, life flowing around them. Kids played. A dog ran past. Leaves rustled in the wind. Keisha smiled. "I was written off as damaged goods," she said. "But it turns out I just changed direction, and that's where real life was waiting for me." Marcus kissed her on the temple, and in that kiss was everything. A promise, hope, a love that doesn't demand perfection, but accepts a person just as they are. Ahead lay the unknown, but Keisha wasn't afraid anymore. Falling had taught her the most important thing. You can always get back up if you know what you're rising for. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now, 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen so you can choose what to watch next.